Frequently asked question number 1. Pet appears great for investors, but how about the average person just looking for a home to buy? You're right. Pet is excellent for investors who are looking to purchase a rental property intended for 100% tenant occupancy. However, the pet tool was uniquely designed for owner-occupied properties as well. What's great about the tool is that upon making your inputs, one can quickly evaluate how much money it will take to maintain the property, and most importantly, what the return on investment, or ROI, would be. Now you may ask, how could you possibly have a positive ROI if there are only expenses and no income, such as a family home? Good question. In order to evaluate the property, the buyer must look at the numbers in negative ROI. The properties you do evaluations yielding the least negative ROIs are the ones most financially attractive to you. Let's look at an example. Okay there. I want to run this example and actually see and teach why we need to look at the least negative ROI number, as I had mentioned before. So again, we're going to be focusing here on an owner-occupied home, and so I have here the pet tool open right now, and this is the main interface of the owner-occupied tab. Of course, that's what we're going to be looking at because we have no association with tenants here. It's not going to be tenant occupied, it's going to be owner occupied for a family home. And we want to see actually how you can evaluate the finances of this, even though we know it's going to come out as a negative ROI because the expenses will indeed be more than any income that we could possibly bring in. Let's actually run through this case. I have here a preset scenario here for the family home, but I do want to go through some of the inputs to help clarify a little bit what's there, and I have made them very realistic, so the case is very realistic. Okay, so we have here a family home. The units available for rent, of course, is 0 because it's fully owner-occupied. I have here a list price of $200,000, and it's 3 years old. The area, the square footage rather, is 2,000, and the lot area is about 8,000 square feet. Now for the mortgage information, I'm not going to talk a lot about this. This is pretty standard. The MIP, mortgage insurance premium, and then I have here a 10% down payment at a 5% interest rate on a 30-year mortgage. Then you have the property tax, then the mortgage insurance, etc. Now moving down into the cost, with the $200,000 home, the tool actually estimates the closing will be about $72.72. The utility I have here estimated about $150 for the gas, electricity, water, etc. And then the repairs, any repairs that we may have, and immediate appliances that we need to purchase, such as, let's say, a washer, dryer, refrigerator, and then the maintenance, and then the total closing. Now moving over to the finances, we have here again $200,000 for the purchase price. That's different than the list price because that's what the seller is trying to get rid of it for. But let's just say we're trying to buy it at the same price the same price that the property is listed at. Here's the 30-year term. Property insurance, I have here $30. That might be actually a little on the low side. Let me just go ahead and change that to $50 a month for property insurance, to be a little bit more pessimistic and maybe more realistic. $100 for the price per square foot, and the loan amount comes out to about $181,800. Now, the income and the growth. Right here for the vacancy factor, of course, we have 0. That's really a non-applicable item since it's not tenant occupied. And then the rent, which is, of course, 0. No rent coming in. But here we have a savings of $800. Now what this is it's taking into account the amount of money that you were paying in rent, either in a rental home or an apartment, that you had nothing more than receipts to show for. But now if we're going to be moving on into the owner occupancy of a home that we now have purchased, that payment is very different than a rental payment, okay? Because it's a mortgage payment, which of course portions of that we can deduct because portions of it are interest, and things like this. So I actually have here an $800 savings that's incorporated into this. I'll refer back to this later to explain more how this works. Here's the appreciation percentage, which I don't actually incorporate into the tool. I wanted to run actually a pessimistic scenario, so these numbers are not actually incorporated into the finances, but they are there transparently written so you can see them if we were to appreciate 5% per year. Then the tax advantages, not going to get into this, but they are calculated here. Now, the most important thing that I want to focus on is the investment box. Here we have an ROI of 13.69%, and of course that's negative 13.69%. For just memory's sake, I'm going to carry that over here, negative 13.69%. And we're going to keep focus on that number because that's the ROI of this case we just ran. Now the bottom line numbers, this is really just the net income. Now we have a net income, which is negative, and a realized net income. Now, of course, you may ask, well, what's the difference between the net income and realized net income? Well, the net income is really the bottom line value of how much money is going out of our pocket, okay, which here is negative $1,358. But if you incorporate that savings amount up here that I mentioned before, because we're no longer forking up money in rental, because that was for our prior living condition, was $800 being forked out every month. Now, if you accommodate for that amount of money that was lost in rental income, in here, that actually was what will define the realized net income, which is $558 every month. Now, of course, that's negative. So you may say, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but what's that actually mean? How can I use that to help determine if the property's good or not? Good question. Now, let's go ahead and actually run another case, because that's why I wanted to capture that negative 1369. Because if we run now another case for another home, we want to see what the finances look like for that. So let's go ahead and run a property as if it was a $180,000 home. Okay, so this is another home. Let's say it's $180,000. Let's say it's a little bit older. Let's say it's 7 years old rather than 3. The square footage, let's say it's a little bit smaller. Let's go 1,800 square feet. And let's say the lot area is the same. That's not going to be a big difference. The mortgage information, let's assume that's all the same. Finances are all going to be equivalent. Now, I'm going to put here the $180,000 for the purchase price. And we're going to see here the costs are a little different. Closing is a little bit smaller. Utility, let's just keep that the same. And repair, maintenance costs, total closing, they're the same. However, I do need to change the repair and maintenance cost tab down here because this is where we input the age of the property, which will determine the maintenance cost per month. It's no longer 3, it's 7. So with that, I'm going to go back to the owner-occupied tab, and we're going to move on. Finances, all this will remain the same. 30-year term, let's say it's still $50 a month for property insurance. Here's the income growth, everything will remain the same. Tax advantages, everything remains the same. Now, when we look at the investment box, look what has changed. It's no longer 13.69%, which of course is negative, but it's now negative 12.95%. I'm going to go ahead and capture that right here. Negative 12.95%. Now, we can see that this property is less negative than the prior case, which was the $200,000 property, which was negative 13.69%. Now, even though this property is less in terms of its cost, $180,000, but it is older and it is a little smaller. But even though, despite those little changes, it's still more financially attractive, being less negative with the ROI, than the $200,000 property, which is a negative 13.69%. So just between these two properties, you can easily identify that the $180,000 one is more profitable. It's a better purchase. Now, this is just between two properties. One, of course, can see how you can do this on 3, 4, 5, 6 properties. And what I personally do is when I analyze the property by making my inputs, I actually print it out on my printer, and then I will lay each one side by side so I can easily and transparently see the difference between each one of the properties, and then make my decision from there on which one is most profitable and better financially for me. So anyway, I hope that clarifies things a little bit better when it comes to evaluating the finances using the PET tool on an owner-occupied home. I hope that made things a little bit easier to understand and more transparent. Have a great day.